Welcome everybody to our 89th Learn Fast webinar that we've been doing since we started these back a little over a year ago. This is the 15th of 2021, and this one we have a special topic and a special guest. We're going to talk about using data to confirm aero gains, and that was kind of the start of the topic. And then as I was starting to put this together, and how we would maybe attack it, I will apologize a little up front. We're going to talk about using data to confirm aero gains, but I thought we would start with maybe a part of the presentation where we just chat about aero and some of the different things. And our guest has some experience in wind tunnels and some others. So it's some other things. So it's going to be interesting to just chat about some of that, take some of your questions about some of the things that you think, and chat with AJ about aero stuff. And then we'll get into the data and kind of prove some of the items that we're going to chat about, and show some pictures and give you some links to some of the different videos that AJ has built. It might be kind of fun. So perfect. So let's introduce AJ and maybe get the start going. Boom, there we go. Our guest today is a first-time guest with us here to co-host one of our webinars, and it's the fellow's name is AJ Hartman. He's up in the Northeast, and he runs a company called AJ Hartman Aero. And met AJ a number of times. I mean, gosh, I think the first time we met was 7, 8, 10 years ago, maybe. You came to one of my webinars there, I think in New Jersey, and we chatted a little bit. And just a fun guy. I really enjoy AJ, and then he's gotten so deep into the aerodynamic side and the composites, and really a kind of a cool business model that he's built there. So he's been racing for quite some time. He was the 2019 NASA American Iron National Champion, and those are hard things to do, and pretty impressive, some of the stuff that he's done. Working in this aero profession since 2013, relies on all sorts of types of data for his business, for his racing. He's a heavy user of AIM data, and we welcome here for his first shot here on our AIM webinar series. Welcome, AJ. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We're going to have a good time, and we're going to chat about some different things, and maybe some pictures of stuff. I thought it was kind of cool when I was watching, learning a little bit, kind of getting up to speed, as I always do for all of these webinars. You notice here that the CD equals, and then there's the formula here. And I was looking at AJ's website, and that was in a list of things when he was talking about things that intrigued him, and on his about page, that was something. Every time he looks at something, he sees that formula, and so I put it right into his list of information about him. I thought that was pretty cool. So it's kind of a fun thing. I thought what we would start with is a little bit of, let's chat with everybody about just some aerodynamic basics before we get into some wind tunnel testing and some different things. We'll just talk about some things that a lot of people, we all have questions about. We all have this basic knowledge, but what I'd like you to do is give us an idea, within 3 minutes, tell us everything there is to know about aero. No, some aero basics. One of the things I always think about is downforce versus drag. Give us a little bit of an idea of what your big goal is to get as much downforce with as little drag, I suppose, right?
Yeah, because lift over drag is essentially the efficiency of a particular part for the car as a whole. And I always get people asking, is the drag going to slow you down so much? And what your goal is, it's always kind of tough, because if you're building an unlimited time attack car or something, you want as much downforce as possible because you're making 1,000 horsepower. But if you're a power limited class, you might want to try and moderate it a little bit. A lower horsepower car, you don't want the most amount of aero. But like anything with racing, there's always that balance somewhere in the middle of maximum downforce versus drag. But you also can have more efficient parts that make more downforce with the same or less drag. So that's kind of, there's always that juggle between how you want to set up your car, or individual parts as to how efficient they may be, and that's the nitty-gritty details. That's you know, really hard to get good at.
Yeah, and I always think back to the Indianapolis when they're preparing for the big 500-mile race, and they start with these cars, and the goal is to have them be able to drive this 2.5-mile oval with the throttle flat to the floor, have enough grip to get through the corner, but as little drag as possible to get down the straightaway. And then it's front to rear balance, and there's and all this rake stuff. It's such a deep game that basically exactly what you just chatted about. So it's kind of funny.
Yep, for sure. Yep.
Okay. A couple things that I thought we would do here today is AJ has a YouTube site that I think has probably been linked over there, or he's getting ready to link, and it kind of interesting where he goes. He's probably visited the wind tunnel 4 times, and there's probably 7 or 8 videos based on those trips. And what I did is I went through the some of his videos, and I just grabbed some screen captures, just kind of talking points of stuff that I found interesting that I hope all of you will as well. And the first one I grabbed because it was the first, leading into here they are parked in the parking lot, getting ready to go into the tunnel, and they're grabbing the stuff that they're going to work on that time. That's a pile of louvers for the front hood in this particular case, and somebody's backpack, probably some tools and tape to change them. But what I saw was what I titled this slide was a different form of data, because I was just grabbing this for the louvers, but then I looked at the side of the truck, and this is something that we all can do on our race cars when we're at the track as well. Is look at the airflow. They drove down in the rain, obviously, and there's dirt, and we can all see where the air was pushing this dirty water and curling around and around that fuel door, and and then back here at the back you can see this line here. It's just kind of funny that there's hints to you as aero folks, and all of us as race cars are with all our race cars, that we can see some different things. That kind of an interesting thing that we've seen before we ever got started. What do you think about that, AJ?
Yeah, you can tell a lot just from the way the trails are. We drove down during a snowstorm, so I think that's like road salt and stuff. The same thing can be seen if you've ever seen a car after like the 24 hours of Daytona or Le Mans. If they have to race during the rain, and then afterwards, you can sometimes see how the trails of the dust and the dirt go around the car and everything. But something as simple as this, it's almost like free flow viz, if you will. Yeah. And you can clearly see the separation zones behind the back, the corner of the cab, where all of a sudden you see those trails, a little bit of a separation zone behind the gas door, where it kind of comes out and starts going down a little bit. Yep. So yeah, something like that is you can actually pick up a few little things just from looking at the trails of the dirt once the water evaporates. Yep.
And some of this is available to racers that are going out on the track, and I see it in Formula One. I see it IndyCar, maybe even some stock car guys back when they tested a little bit. They would get that what looked like a good thick oil, but it was fluorescent yellow, fluorescent orange, and they would put drops of that on the leading edges, and then they would go out and run, and the wind slowly drags that back, and they can come back and look at it. Virtually the same thing we're getting here, and you can all of us have that available to us if there's a concern about a certain area of your car. Right?
Yeah, you can always like a poor man flow viz, little oil drops, and just kind of see which way they go around a certain thing. If you have separation, they'll actually come backwards towards the airflow. So yeah, you can pick up a lot of stuff with very simple tools.
Is there a minimum speed that downforce is not effective, or is that totally independent on the surface and the type, and that's kind of a loaded question, I suppose, right?
Yeah, a little bit of a loaded question, just because speed is a factor in downforce no matter what. So effectively, a few miles an hour, it's doing something. But in terms of actual grip to the car, 60, 70 miles an hour is where it should do enough. You should probably feel something, but it's exponential. So the faster you go, the more downforce you start making as well. But yeah, I get that question all the time. At what speed does downforce start working? Again, depends on your aero setup. You know, if you're an autocross car and you have some huge wing, you want something that works at, you know, 50, 60 miles an hour. Like we were talking about earlier, on a road course, you want to take drag into consideration a little bit more, maybe not as crazy aero. So yeah, a little bit of a loaded question. It works better the faster you go is kind of the simplest way to put it.
So it really is a scale thing, right? I mean, it really is working
Yeah.
at 2 or 3 miles per hour, but it's
Yeah.
so small you can't measure it. It's there,
Right.
and as
Right.
it's going up, it just keeps getting bigger and
Yeah.
bigger and more noticeable and more noticeable. And we're
Yeah.
going to see a
Yeah.
little bit
Well,
of that discussion in some pictures we see here in a minute.
I was just going to bring that up. When we actually get to the data, you can see like the slower the turn, my speed traces are very close, but the faster the turn, there's a clear difference in speed. Right. So yeah, the faster you go, the more downforce and grip you make.
Tim asked, curious, what wind tunnel are we at here in our pictures?
The A2 wind tunnel in Mooresville, North Carolina. It is the non-moving floor tunnel, and it is I'll say the cheap tunnel, which is still $600 an hour. I get that question a lot. People always ask how much it is. And depending on how you look at it or what data you get, some people may think that's expensive. Personally, I think it's money well spent if what you learn can make your car faster, no matter what, you know, new tires, old tires, different power, different setup. If your aero is set up, you know, that speed, you get that all the time, no matter what. So, but yeah, the A2 in North Carolina.
And you mentioned that is the one with the static floor, the static fixed floor. What
Yep.
have you looked at data? Maybe you haven't been to a moving ground plane tunnel. What is your thought about the opinion about the difference between the two?
It would be nice. And actually behind the picture we're looking at right now, I believe that's the Aerodynamic wind tunnel that a lot of NASCAR teams use. I think even IndyCar teams go there. And that does have a boundary layer floor, which is very similar to a moving floor. But I believe that's like $2,500 an hour, and it's booked solid for like the next 2 years. So, but yeah, there is, since anytime we really went to the tunnel, we were doing overbody aerodynamics. So like canard, the louvers, wings. But if you were to do like a flat floor or a diffuser, you would kind of want to take it with a little grain of salt, because a non-moving floor tunnel, you get a boundary layer that builds up across the floor as well as the car. So you will actually get a little more pressure under the car because you have two boundary layers building up. Whereas a rolling floor, you don't get the boundary layer along the ground. You get just the air moving across the car. I hope that all makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, if you were doing underfloor aerodynamics, you could still get good data for sure, but you would kind of want to take that into consideration a little bit.
Perfect. And a lot of stuff we're going to talk about today was over the top, so the floor would have made no difference.
Right. Yep.
I got a couple people just mentioning it. They're not complaining, but your video does freeze up a little bit. Let's just make sure everybody understands. Don't change anything. In AJ's shop, his internet speed is fairly slow. So what we did is AJ is. And they're also saying that your audio is just fine. We're doing the audio through his phone, and we're doing the video through the wired connection. So he may freeze up a little bit, but the audio is going to go well. So focus on the pictures and the stuff we're talking about, not necessarily on AJ.
Yeah, one of the advantages of moving to the middle of nowhere is
exactly. So let's go to the next slide, and not a whole lot to talk too much about here, but what I thought was kind of cool is the wind tunnel was actually a wind tunnel inside of a building. It just looks like the just kind of a standard metal building that you would see everywhere, and then there's this wind tunnel that's been built inside of it. I thought that was just kind of a cool thing at the A2 wind tunnel. So and this is just a screen capture from one of the videos that AJ put out about some of his trips there. It's kind of cool.
Yep.
This is a picture. And this is a picture inside that tunnel. Just such a clean, sterile professional place. I just
Mhm.
kind of, I love it. What do you got to bring the car in, tie it down, get it onto all the sensors and all the scale pads? Is that
Yep.
what you're
Yeah.
doing here?
Yeah. So once you get the car in the tunnel centered and everything, you can see the pads underneath the rear tire. So you do have to compensate for that by adjusting the spring perches. But yeah, you strap down the front, it sits on scales. And then I did get a chance to see underneath of it, like all the sensors and tubes, if you're doing pressure ports and stuff, to kind of make everything work. You know, that's all exactly how it's set up is a little bit beyond me. But yeah, so that was the E36 that we went with, and we did, I believe, almost 40 runs on that car. Collectively, between all of my runs, I'm almost 100 runs through the wind tunnel testing various different sorts of things. But yeah, that's pretty much the inside of the wind tunnel. From that camera angle backwards is the cool shot, because you see the big fans and everything that draw the air through. And then the front that we're looking at, I don't know the exact name for it, but yeah, there's almost like a honeycomb mesh screen that smooths the air as it comes into the tunnel to kind of, so you're not getting turbulent air into the tunnel, you're getting nice smooth air hitting, or, you know, going over and around the car.
Perfect. Kind of cool. And then there's some windows built in, a lot of light so you can see some things.
Yep.
And then some
Yep.
windows and some
Yep.
other things. So pretty cool.
Yeah, the windows on the right, you can actually watch it live if you want to look at the wool tufts or anything like that. Yep.
Okay. Oops. Okay, let's get into some of the changes that you did. And again, some of this is or all of this is documented on your YouTube site. I know our guys have been putting links up there, but I thought this was kind of an interesting series of images over a course of a video or two. You brought the car in, and you've got all these the front hood louvers have all been just basically covered up, and it's you're starting with doing some baseline runs. You ended up with large some large air escapes or whatever, louvers in the hood no matter what. And then one of the tests you did here was with the smoke as the wind is blowing, and watching how the smoke goes in and how it is evacuating out of those.
Yep.
And the entire time you've got the drag and the downforce numbers. Kind of an interesting thing. What can you share about some of the stuff in these three pictures?
Yeah, so these, I went with a company called Race Louvers. Al Watson started that company. And louvers are pretty cool because it's one of the times where you can really make some good front end downforce while increasing cooling. So it's a little bit of a win-win. It was really interesting. Like, I knew we would see a difference, but just changing some of the angle of the louvers or the opening, or, if they're recessed or, protruding louvers, I've seen some louvers make over double the downforce and twice the pressure differential on the front and rear of a radiator versus others. So it's one of those neat things where it's like, it doesn't seem like a very big thing, but you can get some big gains, especially around the cooling area. And you can see on the top right picture, the kidney grill on the E36. See how it's taped up? Yep. So we even calculated, I have all my data off to my right that I'm looking at, a percentage of how much the grill is taped up. And like I mentioned earlier, underneath of the wind tunnel, you can run pressure probes to pretty much whatever you want, but Al ended up running them to the front of the radiator and the rear, and you can get a pressure drop across to know how much of a gain you would get in basically cooling capacity. So yeah, tons of data on louvers and stuff, and yeah, they're pretty neat devices for sure.
From what you just said, it sounds like it was almost it's one of those areas where it's the win-win. It's like free, right? Because you're getting downforce
Right.
without additional drag. So
Right. There are
cool.
very few win-wins in aerodynamics, but yeah, around the cooling system is one of the best ones you can do. Ducting your radiator on the front side is huge. If the air just hits your radiator and you have no ducting and it just spills around the edge or builds up pressure under the hood, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. That's one of those big ones that I see. That's a low-hanging fruit that a lot of people can improve upon.
And it just gets worse and worse the faster you go, obviously, for higher speed tracks.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
how much time, Brian has a question, how much time is lost between the start and stop of each various tests? And if you watch the video, Brian, and AJ, you can comment in a second, you watch the videos, and while he does start and stop his camera a little bit, they're there, it's $600 an hour, and they've only got 2 hours or 3 hours booked. When they run the test, and I don't know how long it takes to spool up the test and spool down, maybe you can help that, but in between, they're running in there, they're untaping things, taping stuff up, running back out, and running another test. How long does it take for them to spool up that, you know, not the work that you're doing, but to slow down and then spool back up the
I believe each run is 3 to 5 minutes. So they start it up. Once it gets to speed, they let it stabilize a little bit, and then they take 2 samples like 30 seconds apart, just in case they're a little bit off or whatever. And you know, they're never really more than, I don't know, a couple tenths of a pound off. You know, so it's pretty accurate. And then as quickly as we can change over, I guess depending on what you want to test. Anywhere from 6 to 10 runs an hour is about a good average. Yeah.
Then what they're measuring is they're very, very good scale pads, for lack of a better word, right? For down. And then somehow they've got some sensors on for how much the car is being forced
drag
as well for the drag side. So really it's 2 dimensions they're measuring. Yeah.
So those scales underneath the tires, measure down, and they measure a rearward force to measure drag.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect. Do you vary the wind tunnel speeds or just keep it at a nominal number for all tests? Todd asks.
I believe actual wind tunnel speed is 80 or 85 miles an hour, but they give you a whole bunch of data. And at that point, like that formula on the first slide, there's formulas for all sorts of stuff. You can actually, in the data they give you, put in a different mile an hour, and it just extrapolates it up to whatever speed you want. Now that will, in real world, if you start going a little bit faster, you could maybe get separation off of something that you didn't at the 85 miles an hour, but it's pretty close.
Okay. Perfect. And then Eldon mentions he sees you're using the yarn string, and we're going to talk some about, and he's pointing at it as part of the video here. He's talking about what it's doing. Have you ever considered using that fly fishing line or something that responds better to airflow, or is yarn? I know yarn's been used forever in this world, right? These little wool tufts, but is there some other stuff you might use in the future?
I've always seen people use yarn. I've used yarn. You can tell a lot from it. I have not heard of the fly fishing line. I might look into it now because there could be something better. But we just use the wool tuft, and it's kind of been good for us.
A couple more questions. I love it. We're hitting you with questions like crazy. So and the next 2 are stuff that was in my mind as I was looking at this, and they both came about the same time. So I'll ask them both. But David talks about is there a yaw measurement? Let's get back to that one in a second. And Tice mentions, how critical is it to place the car exactly straight in the tunnel? How much work do you put into that? And then David's what about yaw measurement? Are you thinking about that as well?
So this tunnel does not do yaw. I guess if you really wanted to measure yaw, you could purposely put the car in the tunnel a little bit crooked, a few degrees. But this tunnel does not. And then I'm sorry, centered. Yeah, we try and get it fairly centered, because as the air hits the car, it's going to go around the car and back a slide, seeing the inside of the tunnel. It's a decent sized tunnel. You can fit a full car in it, obviously, but it will speed up the air around the side of the car, and you can actually measure side force. Side force won't really mess with the downforce or the drag of the car, but we take a tape measure and make sure it's within 1/4 of an inch centered within the tunnel. Yeah.
And while measuring and making sure you're centered, you do it front and back so you get the car as straight as possible as well. Okay. And you talk about the NASCAR guys, at least I watched on TV, right, just like everybody else. But they when those cars for a while there, and the rules were allowed where they were actually yawing the car down the straightaway just to get the wind off of the back back splitters, the splitter, and of course the back blade. And I think there's a little less of that right now, but no doubt they have spent a lot of time in wind tunnels with the cars yawed out, right, to measure that. So, and at that point, you'd want that rolling road underneath, right, to make those numbers be prepared. So, to be correct, right? So, Can you discuss the value of aero studies for a spec car where you just some just give us your thoughts real quickly. But when you got I'm going to show some data here in a little bit from an MX-5 Cup car that we personally ran, and those are 100% spec. You can't do anything with them, and except for rake, ride height, yaw, some basic settings. What do you think about that? And what does your aero tell you that would be important in a spec car?
Usually spec classes, I'm not a fan of them because I like to tinker too much.
Yeah,
they tell you what you can or can't do. So honestly, you would think everybody's just about equal. I guess you can just kind of make sure your body gaps are like as tight as possible to the hood. You don't want the hood, the hood pins, if your hood pops up a quarter of an inch, like that E36, for example, the first run we did, the hood, it wasn't latched properly or something and popped up like a half of an inch. And we ended up making like 80 pounds of front lift on the car. Put it down and we lost a whole bunch of lift. So yeah, just making sure those little tiny things could add up. If you're allowed to tape your grill, if cooling isn't an issue, for sure, tape your grill up. But yeah, spec classes are tricky because they kind of say like, you can do this and that's it. You mentioned rake, that might be one to maybe the rake of the car could give you a little bit of downforce. But yeah, there's not much you can do usually. So yeah, there's fine details, but yeah, they're not going to be huge.
It really is optimizing all the little things to just like anything you do in a spec class. It's all about when you do 1,000 of them and it's small ones, it ends up being a big deal. I've never been to a wind tunnel, but I have raced in a lot of spec classes, and the MX-5 Cup series, there were little things we were trying to do to keep things. One of the ones that you did a video on was building a little bit of a cover, not a cover, but a leading edge for the AIM GPS sensor that was mounted on the top of a car. You did a little 3D print, just little things like that. But and while it's probably nothing in alone, but if you did that in the hood pins and make sure your splitter is perfect, at the right angles and all these little things, you end up with a car that's a mile and an hour or 2 miles an hour faster on the back straightaway, right? So perfect. The next one I wanted to kind of show, we kind of got into it a little bit, was these yarn tufts, and just some, and I know it's going to be hard to see, but maybe some of you can look fairly closely. But I picked these two pictures during runs. He's looking in that window and taking some video looking into the window, but you can see these tufts blowing the directions that you would not expect. They're straight and along the body, and then all of a sudden this one's down, this one's blowing backwards, right?
Going back,
and you can see some of the stuff up on the hood and on the windshield where it's actually starting to curl over. And here in the back window, there's some louvers, and these things almost look like they're being sucked in, right? And certainly changing directions here. You chatted a little bit about the yarn tufts, but anything else you see there that's kind of interesting?
From this angle, nothing crazy. You can see that there's good attached flow down the whole back windshield. And I think later we're going to get into the Vortex Generators, which is probably why they didn't work good on this car. The ones at the base where the trunk meets the windshield, if they're kind of flopping around, you can maybe optimize that somehow. But yeah, again, wool tufts, it can tell you a lot just by looking at them, where air is going. The top picture, you can see the ones at the base of the hood, but not on the windshield, are actually kind of going almost like down and in a little bit. Yeah, because I don't think the cowl panel was sealed under this. So they kind of almost want to wrap down and in, because under the hood is lower pressure than right at the base of the windshield there. So again, without even going to a wind tunnel, putting some wool tufts on your car, you can kind of start to optimize a few areas of the car, and just optimizing those few little areas, removing a little bit of drag or making a little more downforce here and there, does add up.
Yeah, absolutely. The when we were talking about, Brian had a question. I'll reword it a little bit, but downforce numbers with rake changes, can you get that out of this type of a tunnel, or would you need the rolling road type to get decent numbers?
We can. One of the videos we did with the the BMW, the M2 that we did. And this actually, I did a whole entire video on this. He actually said hi earlier, Mark Petronis.
Yeah.
Mark,
okay.
I'm going to get on their bus real quick. He sent me a video or a picture of one of our splitters on his car, and the trailing edge of the splitter was actually getting scraped up. And I told him the only way that happened is that, the splitter's pointing up at the nose. And we're talking a flat body, maybe with tunnels, not like an actual profiled splitter you see on like a prototype car or something. He ended up, correcting the splitter angle, and then ended up setting like the overall track record at New York Safety Track or something, I think. And, he said it made a big difference. But yeah, that M2 that we went to the wind tunnel with, we were struggling with front aero because they had to swap an engine in the car. They blew it up on the dyno like 3 days before the wind tunnel. And then from the wind tunnel, they were going all the way to Pike Peak. So the splitter was actually pointed up a little bit. And sorry, I'm looking at my data real quick. Adding about a degree at 100 miles an hour gave us somewhere around 80 pounds of extra downforce in the front.
Wow.
So yeah, it can, especially if it's a large splitter, so the rake of the splitter is pretty important. The rake of the entire car, especially if it's a flat floored car, is pretty important. I'm getting on a tangent, forget what the original question was, but yeah, okay. Splitter rake.
you can get to that without the rolling road. That the question was basically the rolling, the moving road.
You can still get good data, especially for a splitter, because it's the very first thing the air hits. Gotcha. You're not really getting that boundary layer off the floor, messing it up too much.
Very cool. Does taping up seams between the hood and the fenders make any real significant difference in aero?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the first run we did where the hood popped up and the car ended up making lift. Let's see. The front made 45 pounds of lift, and then it went down to about 20 when we made sure the hood was closed. So yeah, so that just kind of goes to show that, yeah, even if you tape the gap between like the headlights and the grille and the hood, yes, you should see a little bit of a gain from doing something like that.
And is it more important for the seams that are running with the air or the seams that are running perpendicular? Which one are the more important ones?
That's one I don't know. I would think it would almost act like, I would think it would almost act like taping up the front edge a little bit. But yeah, I don't have any, back to back of taping up the fender to hood seams, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, put that on your list, right? Maybe if you find it interesting. When taping the grill, is it better? Now you've got an opening, basically, is what they're saying, and this is one of those that I think you just want to test it. But when taping the grill, is it better to tape the top portion of the grill up a little higher, or is it better the bottom? The one you did on the BMW kidney grills, you went from the sides and came in. Is there a reason you did that, or is it just you were just trying to get rid of some of the area?
Yeah, we've tried a couple different ways. The Audi video is the first one we went on, and we ended up, believe it or not, there was a difference between taping up the side vertical or just like a piece of tape across the bottom. Again, I guess it depends. If you have a splitter, I generally tape up the bottom because it kind of builds up a little more high pressure on top of the splitter. Where if you tape up the sides coming in, the center going in might still not have quite a higher pressure. Yeah, the difference between taping up the sides of the grill versus the bottom are minute, so I wouldn't really worry too much about that one. But taping up a certain percentage of your grill is always a good move if you can get away with it.
There you go. Do you use loaded question a little bit? Does AJ use suspension sensors to look at aero performance with the type of data profiles John Block has allowed? Just a little quick idea. AJ has a couple of videos where he has moved from a solo which is the data we're going to look at in just a moment, to an MXG that he's put in the car, and he's got the suspension sensors, but he's been so busy working with people on aero things that he hasn't had a chance to work on his own car. So those are coming, and but we are going to show some data here in just a moment where from our MX-5 Cup car where it does have suspension sensors. And that's exactly the thought process, David, we're going to chat about is looking at some of that, not necessarily John Block's exact formulas, but at least looking at that data. So AJ is doing that, and there's if anybody's interested, contact me later. But there are a ton of different suspension sensors that are available. But one of the ones that are out there that are fairly inexpensive, General Motors has a ride height sensor that a lot of people like to use, and they're I've seen them as low as like $35-$40, maybe averaging in the $75-$80 for a brand new replacement sensor that has good resolution, and you can get pretty darn good suspension travel data with it. And so that makes this an analog sensor that's in the range of what a lot of people might be able to do and want to do. So if you're interested in more of that, send me a note during or after, and I'll get you some part numbers, and you can go start take a look at it. So we may be getting just a little bit behind, which I knew we would, because this is such an intriguing topic, and having somebody here to chat with is so fun for not only me, but by the number of questions, I think everybody else is really enjoying it as well. So, and then part of wind tunnel testing is not just measuring, but also then seeing where things are happening, and you do that with this little smoke wand. And so the next series of pictures I've got is just maybe some feedback from you. This is the smoke wand at the leading edge. What do you see here, and is it different than what you would have thought on this car, or what do you think?
No, it's about what we thought. You can see how the smoke goes up and over the kidney grill. I'm pretty sure it was taped up in this run. It looks like it was. But yeah, the low pressure zone caused by that first one, you can see how it'll help extract some of that air out of the hood. Okay. Which, and that's one of the big contributing factors to the increase in cooling, as well as the increase in downforce. You do pick up a little bit of drag, but the cool thing about that is with the increased cooling, you could then, like we're mentioning, tape up some of the grill and bring that drag actually back down. So it's one of those things where they both kind of add up, and depending what you're going for, it's an extra hot day or your car just always struggles with cooling, they're helpful, but you can also use that additional cooling to trim the car out by taping up the grill.
Yeah, interesting. In most of our minds that don't understand this stuff fully, you've got these louvers you've plugged in here with what looks like about 1.5 inches, almost straight up for the first one, and they lay down a little bit more as they go, which creates this low pressure. And when we first look at that, it's like this is an aerodynamic, poor design here, right? But in the end, it is pulling the hot air out, and it's even getting the wind to go maybe and hit a little higher on the windshield. In the end, it's actually not so bad, and it's giving you these other benefits. So it's kind of a cool thing.
Yep.
Pretty cool. Smoke. Let's go to another smoke shot here where we talk about now the person has put the wand down there, and the wind is actually going into it, and then we're seeing the smoke being evacuated out of under the engine. That's pretty cool.
Yep.
The always a good idea to get that either do not let either you're taking your radiator and you're forcing the air out where you want it to, but if it gets under the hood, you got to give it a place to come out, or else you've got this
get it out somewhere.
You've got this parachute that you're trying to push down the track, right?
Yep.
Is that a gurney flap on the leading edge of the louver? Is there something here, or is this just I think that's a lot of tape in this particular case. But,
that's a lot of duct tape. Yeah, so I don't know if they're talking about the duct tape or the very first louver itself effectively acts as a gurney flap, or some people call it a wicker. And that's kind of what gets that air going up, which allows the rest of the air behind it to kind of get drawn out. Yeah. But that's again, race louvers, Al Watson over there. He even had an angle finder and was like tinkering with the angle of the louvers, doing multiple runs that way, just to kind of try and optimize it. But every car is going to be a little bit different. So, but louvers generally, there's some rule of thumbs you can follow for sure.
And he's in there and he's working hard and he's gaining knowledge for his business, so he can sell these. That's good for him. Good for him. I love it. Here's a little bit of the smoke hitting the front end and then coming around and seeing how these canards work and what
Yeah.
they are doing. And part of the big, I'll let you talk about that a little bit. But one of the other things you did was making some block offs, to keep
Yeah.
the air from hitting the tire as it was exiting this on top of it. Give us a little bit about
Yep.
just the canard and the whole concept behind that.
Yeah. So the canards, a lot of people, if I'll throw a number out there. Every car is going to be different. I got to preface that. But this particular setup at 100 miles an hour made about 45 pounds of downforce on the front, which is pretty substantial, especially since the front of the car was around the 100-pound range. You can see the splitter is pretty small. It's pretty beat up. But what they do, you can see the smoke as it goes up, kind of around the face of the tire. Some of it makes it up and over. What that does is it creates a low pressure zone on the face of the tire just behind the splitter. So a little bit down from right there, which then allows the air under the splitter to move easier, which allows it to move quicker. So if air moves under your splitter faster, you get that dynamic pressure drop on the bottom of the splitter. So the canards themselves don't necessarily make all that downforce, but how they affect the air under the splitter and around other things gives you that total downforce gain. So,
interesting.
And then, you mentioned the tire blockers. Tire blockers help for sure. If somebody asked it yet or not, tire blockers and canards were the best setup for downforce. I get that one. People asking what's better. The canards made more than the tire blockers themselves, but again, just kind of tinkering with that balance, or how much drag you can put up with, will kind of get you to where you want to be.
Interesting. It's all tied together, right?
Yeah.
Very, 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 very cool. This one, there's the next couple before we jump out of here and start maybe looking at some data, but here they took the wand and they put it inside the car. And and so now he's got the smoke inside the car. Number one, Eric made a comment there that I thought it strikes me as funny, but $600 an hour to see smoke coming out of the hood. That's normally we're paying a lot more than $600 an hour to get that. Right? Yeah. So it is kind of a funny statement, but I thought it was pretty good. And it drags into this one, $600 an hour to see smoke coming out of the cabin. That's but what was interesting about this one is it changed as he moved the wand around and where the smoke was inside of here, but very often the smoke would end up coming up and trailing into this this low pressure area here behind the mirror. And I a mirror is sitting out there and it's a big old piece out in the wind, but boy, it would just suck this smoke up and boil in here behind the mirror. And it makes you think, and maybe you look at your mirrors and you put mirrors on it as small as you can put, right? Because of that. Interesting to see.
Yep. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Have you ever tested the same exact thing, but with the window net up? Is actually where I was going to go with it.
I have not yet. I'm going to be taking my GT350 to the wind tunnel later this summer, and that'll be the first car I'll take to the tunnel with stock doors and glass. So we will do a window up, window down. It's pretty easy to say that, the car will have less drag with the windows up. How much? Not quite sure. But that would be, if you're in a class that allows you to have some sort of side window. Most do not, so everybody's in the same boat. It would get rid of all that turbulence and drag coming down the side of the car right there. And like you mentioned, the mirror, my own car, I have a convex mirror up in the front, so I removed my passenger mirror and used one of those little convex circles with like a cone going over it to essentially get rid of my mirrors, because they're a source of drag, and if you can get away with taking them off, again, little bit, all add up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see NASCAR when their guys go to put on the, especially the Talladegas and the Daytona, the aero type tracks, right? You see them and they use super wide banding, and they get in, they make them as tight as they can possibly be.
Tight,
and they're pushing them out. No doubt that the way they mount them is critical, and they're clearly using those as an aerodynamic tool, obviously. Right? So.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other one that was, I thought this one here was the one that of all I seen here, some of it made sense to me, and for the most part, everything made some sense, or at least I could see it. This one here was fun. Is the car has some louvers in the back window, and the fellow that was running the smoke wand was putting it all over in here, and you were taping it all. Anybody can go watch all of these on links of videos that have already gone through. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, all of the links we're talking about will be down in the description box below. He's putting the wand through there, and I don't think any smoke ever came out of those louvers, not a single time from what I can see. And so what I would have thought is all this open window and all, it would be packing some air inside the car, and this would be to allow some smoke to come out, some air pressure to come out. And what it was actually giving the car the ability to evacuate out in other areas by letting air in here. The whole car was a low pressure system. That one shocked me. Sounds like you had understood it already a little bit and understood it.
Yeah, because back a few slides, when you saw the smoke kind of going through the louver, all that air pressure kind of hitting the windshield. Like if you take a top down looking at a car, all that air hits the windshield and then kind of rushes around the side, which is why you'll get evacuation right behind the A pillar, and it'll kind of come and, come around the side of the car. Yeah. So it'll be coming out the front and then sort of making it in around the B pillar or those louvers we saw on the, I guess it'd be the quarter panel window in this car. So yeah, unfortunately we didn't do a run where we like duct tape them up, but personally, I would probably tape them on a situation like this, unless you were like using it to feed, you had a diff cooler back in the trunk somewhere or something. But yeah, I probably would have taped them up. Yeah, a lot of people think just air comes out there, but it does not.
Yeah, pretty cool, pretty interesting, and probably by the shape of almost any sedan, that's probably more a rule than a this car being different. Yeah, kind of interesting. And I see NACA ducts sometimes back here, and and that they might even work a little bit better in that area, since it's already a pressure that you can get the air in there and blow to something that you're after, since it's pulling air in there, obviously already. So interesting. The a question that Bruce had from a little bit earlier, but and this is one of those that I'm sure it depends, right? But on louvers, are there a certain place or ideal positions on the hood? It's probably all about where you vented or routed the air around your radiator, and what room and areas you have underneath the hood, I suppose, right?
Right. Yeah, it depends where your radiator is a little bit, how steep your windshield is. That high pressure bubble at the cowl on a steeper windshield car, that might kind of come forward a little bit more along the hood. You can always wool tuft louvers and see where that bubble is. So yeah, it's important. It's easy enough to kind of be in the ballpark. So yeah, it's one of those things that you don't want them too far rearward, for sure. And then too far forward, if the front louver is in front of your radiator, it's not really doing much either.
There you go. So every car is going to be different. The front end style, how big the splitters are, how steep the windshield, and where everything is placed. It is a science, but it's not a every car is different, right? So very good, very good. The last one I wanted to kind of show was the smoke over the top of the wing, and we've got these end panels on there, and during the video they changed these end panels, and this particular, I took a still here, but if you watch the video, he's moving that wand around back and forth towards the camera and away from the camera, and you can see as the wind what these side panels, these end plates are doing when he's moving that wind, and how it's forcing it over the wing, and then all of a sudden when he comes far enough out, how it goes around it. And it's very very interesting to watch that smoke in this very area.
Yeah, that wing is not one of ours, but it was still pretty neat to see. You can kind of see a vortex starting, how the smoke trails off a little bit, and the customer who owned the car cut those end plates out of a sheet of Lexan or plexiglass or something, which actually made it kind of neat being able to see the smoke. Exactly. But yeah, the smoke kind of tells you some things that the wool tufts do not. But yeah, larger end plates, another rule of thumb situation, generally bigger is better up to an extent. but yeah, you can see the little gurney flap on that wing.
Yeah.
And that was a funny example of, we've done a 1/2-inch gurney flap on several wings now. That particular wing we're looking at now had the biggest downforce gain from a gurney, which is kind of interesting if you think, like, how does a 1/2-inch gurney make anywhere from about 40 pounds? That particular one was like 100 pounds of downforce. But because that wing, it's one of those where the center is not as steep as the sides. And I think what was happening, you can sort of see it in the smoke a little bit. You're getting separation off of the underside. So the gurney flap is sort of delaying that separation. So without the gurney flap, I think the wing was performing really bad, where the gurney brought it into a position where it was performing better, but it added way more drag than any other gurney flap on another wing. So that's one of those ones where it's hard to say specifically. That particular wing wasn't great, I'll say, but it wasn't bad. But yeah, you can do stuff to optimize it for sure.
And you mentioned it in the video, so I'm not talking out of school here, but you mentioned that how else would you learn if you don't have a competitor's wing in there? See what it's doing. And I know in this particular video, or it was one of them, you replaced the entire rear wing and continued on with more tests with your own stuff. And then I didn't care if this wing was yours or one of the other ones, but you obviously do. But I didn't know that. But you have to test against other known things, obviously, or else you don't really.
For sure. Just like the louvers earlier tested other brands, other companies that are out there. Not to like say anything
backwards
negative,
engineering,
or anything. It's just that general knowledge of what part does what is kind of what we're after, because we've tested all of our wings, several canards now, splitter tunnels, and it just kind of, I think, is a little bit of a competitive advantage going to the business sense of what I do.
Yeah, you have to know. Let me look at the next slide. The couple slides, and then I'm going to cover a couple of those questions that we've got there, and then we're going to get into, and I knew it was going to be fairly short on the actual data, but you know what, I think by the number of questions and what we're seeing, I think I was right with it. Everybody would really enjoy this discussion as much as data. So Vortex Generators, you took a minute here towards the end of the run, it looks like, and you stuck these on there. And Vortex Generators, what's the basic use you're trying to do? You're trying to get separation and not get the wind to drop down into that low pressure area?
Vortex Generators re-energize the boundary layer. So you can see as the air comes into those Vortex Generators, you'll get little vortexes coming off of it, which should help delay separation. But if remember back a few slides when I was saying the wool tufts on the back glass were laid down the whole way, this car wasn't a good candidate for Vortex Generators, and I kind of knew that, but the guy who owned this car kind of just wanted to try them just to kind of see, and where they are at is what was recommended by the company that made those. But if you had like a steeper roof or something, you would maybe get better results, or definitely different results for sure. And I believe the next slide shows the exact data we got. Yeah. So I would not recommend these on this car. We picked up more drag than downforce. Actually, so we picked up less than, you're right, that 1 pound of downforce could have just been like a reading in the wind tunnel, no matter what. So weren't good in this case. Doesn't mean they aren't good. Just means this case they weren't beneficial.
And you
kind of things for that way with there.
There you go. And you kind of knew it was going to happen because you had been watching these tufts of yarn, and they were laying correctly. They weren't standing straight up or turning sideways. Because of that, the Vortex Generator didn't need to be used to be straight in the air and keep it down on the surface. Okay. Yep. Perfect. And then one last thing before we it's a tool you use, CFD. What are your findings in your own mind as you've learned more about it and gotten better at it? How much can you do, and how does it relate to real world numbers that you're seeing in wind tunnels and in track testing?
Personally, I don't do the CFD. I know enough to know that I don't know enough about CFD. So because it's like if you took somebody who was just in the cars and put them in a shop with the biggest toolbox in the world, doesn't mean they can properly like fix or work on a car. Where, you know, some guy who's been doing it forever can have like a little roll cab and like fix just about anything he comes across. CFD is the same way, you know, designing what you want, setting up the simulation so everything is kind of how it should be, and Reynolds numbers, all that stuff. I knew enough to know kind of over my head. So we actually subbed out all of our CFD work to a company called JKF Aero. Anybody who watches YouTube, on YouTube, it's Kyle Engineers. So the pictures we're looking at right now are the very last things he did in CFD before he went to Mercedes Formula One team. Was there for 2.5 years about. Ended up leaving there to go back to consulting, and he's done a few things for us since then as well. So yeah, somebody as knowledgeable as him, like, hey, this is kind of what we want to do. This is how much space we have. Here's the rules, class rules, whatever. And then, you know, the pictures we're looking at are just a few screen grabs of hundreds and hundreds of runs that he's done for us. Like, all right, we ended up changing this little bit. Here's the numbers, you know. But the two we're looking at now, tunnels in the splitter, are a huge front downforce generator with very, very little drag increase. And those were used to develop our splitter tunnels that we have. But you can see the darker the blue, the lower the pressure. But yeah, there you go. The blue across the leading edge of the tunnel. And if you look at them, the whole entire body of the splitter is a little more blue than the whole body of the one on the right, the flat tunnel. Yeah, or I'm sorry, flat splitter. So yeah, so CFD, huge beneficial tool. That coupled with the wind tunnel, because one thing you can't really model in CFD is, like we mentioned earlier, the little gaps around the hood. Exactly how is the air going through the radiator? Is it ducted good? You know what I mean? So one is not better than the other. They both are useful for sure. And as far as numbers, unfortunately, I haven't been able to take like an exact CFD scan and put it in the wind tunnel. But as far as the wings, like when we were running through all of our wings, the data from the CFD, again, because the guy that we had do it, extremely knowledgeable, it is pretty much right on with what we were expecting.
Very cool. Very cool. The let's get into a little bit of data here with our last 3 minutes. I joke a little bit, but it's
I got a little extra time. Yeah,
that's fine. That was very, very enjoyable. And there's a couple questions we will try to get. We'll sneak here in the end if we can. Okay. But now that we're going to take this and we're going to take it into data and some aero. This is a screen capture of my son's MX-5 Cup car. It happens to be on the Miller Motorsports Park front straightaway, a very, very long straightaway that, and if you look here, you're minus, I got snap on, so it's minus 1,000 here. And when he hits the brakes, it's about, 24. So about 3,500 feet or so of full throttle, straightaway. From about here where this is suspension speed trace at the top, front suspension sensors here on the in the window number 2 of the setup, and in window number 3 is the rear suspension pots. And what I wanted to kind of just show here that this MX-5 Cup cars have no roof, so it's a convertible, right? It's an open top car with just a cage, kind of a parachute, you would think. And what I did is I took the front suspension sensors and I just kind of split the middle of where it was when we first started here at about 74 miles per hour. You can see bumps and you can see, hitting cracks and big bumps in the track. And then here at the end, I took the white line and I just made it a straight line between where the car kind of ended up at 114 miles an hour, a 40 mile per hour gain, only 114 miles per hour. And the way I set up my suspension sensors is that line is basically doing what that corner of the suspension is doing. So if that line is going up, as it is slightly, that is the tire going up into the fender. Or if the suspension travel is going up, the front of the car is going down, right? So everybody gets an understanding of how that kind of looks. So as this car is going down this front straightaway, the farther it goes, it is pushing the nose of the car down. Pretty much what you would expect, right? On the back end of the car at the exact same time, probably at a greater degree, the suspension travel is actually going down. The back of the car is coming up as the car is at only 114 miles an hour. So it's pushing the front down. It's picking the back up. It's got lift in the back instead of any form of drag. Kind of what you would have expected as you and I chatted about this, but we can actually see it in the data with suspension sensors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty neat. I don't have suspension travel sensors on my car yet, but yeah, it's pretty obvious that the front, surprisingly, is actually making a little bit of downforce.
Yeah.
Somebody much smarter than me could probably do some sort of, math channel combined with like the spring rate and leverage of the spring and everything to actually compute that into downforce. But I'm guessing, I'm not super familiar with those cars. Is there some sort of like plastic like splash shield under the front bumper, or is there factory ducting going to the radiator or something, which is probably why you're actually seeing a little bit of that downforce on the front. And then the rear, being an open top car, you're not getting lift. There's no roof or rear glass to produce lift. So most of that force is probably just from like the air getting stuck underneath of the car and kind of almost lifting the car up a little bit. Because a closed top car, you'll get low pressure over the roof and the back glass, and you would probably see much more lift than you're seeing on your MX-5 car.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And just so you know, the front end of these cars, it is a normal front bumper. These are 100% stock, but there is a piece of plastic that goes back about to behind the engine that it is 100% a flat bottom. From the face of the front bumper back to about the suspension, maybe a little behind the engine or so. So there is a bit of a flat bottom tray there that that probably is creating this.
That car would be a prime example of if you have a little bit of excess cooling capacity. I don't know if you're allowed, tape up a little bit of the grill and see how the numbers and the top speeds change.
Somebody smarter than me obviously thought about this, because there was a rule and that got added in about the time when we were racing, I think the year after, that they were saying no tape. And then somebody, I don't remember even the team or who it was, but they got caught with tape on the cars and got booted out of a race. So somebody had taken a car to a tunnel or understood it enough that, just like you did, boy, some tape would probably help this car a lot. But I think you're right.
Or you can just pack the grill or pack the radiator with a little bit of dirt across a couple of the roads.
There you go. There you go. Here's some data from your car, and we'll kind of end with this. I know we're kind of at that limit, but we probably won't go into the live data, but this is the data I wanted to show anyway. You have a couple of videos. They've already been linked a little bit, but you had the same car, your race car, and you a huge amount of aero for one class that you could run, and you had to run a limited amount for a certain other class. So you were at New Jersey Motorsports Park, and you did a back-to-back run, and this is that data. And what do you see here? And give a little bit of background on the two classes and what you did, and then let's take a quick look at the data.
So for a little bit of context, I believe in the description below is my ST2 versus American Iron Aero setups, going over the differences of those. But the ST2 allows much larger aero. So I had a much bigger splitter, much more volume in the splitter tunnels, and our large dual element wing on it, versus American Iron allows a 5-inch splitter. It did have tunnels in it. I had the canards on the car. And our 14-inch single element wing, because that's the rule for American Iron. So my American Iron setup was not a slouch in the aero department at all, but you can still see through the fast turns, especially towards the end of the lap, the light bulb, right there, the red and pink, I guess we'll call it, the speed difference going into it and how much I can kind of carry on to the front straight a little bit. But as we mentioned earlier, you got a little bit more drag, so you can see that my top speeds are down a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, that's kind of, quick glance at it.
Look at the numbers. I mean, it's 78, 79 on the 3 laps of the blue, and 84, 85, high 85s, right? So it's basically 85, 86 that you're able to carry with that extra front, I suppose mainly front grip, or was it a bigger rear wing as well? across the board.
Total
Okay,
downforce.
gotcha.
And yeah, in case if anybody's wondering, I was on Toyo RA1s, or I'm sorry, Toyo RRs, both of these. So same tire, same car. Looking at the dates on these were the ones where I de-aeroed the car, did a whole video on this.
Yeah.
So the one runs were in the morning, and then during lunch, swapped the large ST2 wing and splitter for my American Iron wing and splitter. So like, you know, an hour and a half later was the blue runs. And I think I kept it in the video. The first time I went out with the American Iron Aero, going into turn 2, went too quick. Didn't have as much grip as I was expecting. Yeah, and down where Roger's pointing, if you looked at my GPS trace, it just goes like way off a little bit.
I decided not to include that lap in here, just
yeah.
But what's interesting about this is, and we are running short of time. We're already a little long, but you look at the differences here, and where did you gain or lose time, right? And you see the blue versus the fastest of the 2 red laps is from about here, right? If I click anywhere in here, the thing starts to climb the time compare bar, and it really gets crazy, you know, right here where you're turning into turn 2, right? And
that's it. You can see. We're right around 95 miles an hour at that point.
Yeah, and then here where you're still at 85. So this entire area here between 70 and 95 through this series of S corners and entering this the cornering force part of that corner, it's almost a second of time that the car would do. And now we're talking same driver, same tires, just these aero aids that you did here, right? And you can see the loss. And then what's interesting is now you're going down the straightaway, and it flattens out immediately. And actually, if you look at the data, the red has higher exit speed, all good, higher, you know, 20% of the way down the straightaway, and then the lines cross. And and you get up here to the end, and it's 122s, 123s, and 121s. So there's a difference in top speed. Now it's up to you to make some decisions on, you know, the different type of track you have. Is it better to have a high speed car with less drag, or is it better to have grip in the mid speed, low speed, you know, high speed corner stuff, right?
Right. Yeah.
Pretty interesting, and you can see that very clear on that one straightaway. This one here, this is an oddity, and I think it's just because there was a track change or something, because you have more grip, you have more downforce, should have more braking, but you're consistently off the brakes sooner. So my guess is there was some gravel, or, you know, some track change, or your brake pads are getting something, right? So because you're still able to roll through the middle, but you actually gave up a little bit on braking. So it may just be
that's just an area that I, as a driver, could have optimized. There may have been laps where I outbroke the blue line, but they weren't my fastest lap. It looks like we got my quick laps up, I think. But
that's what I tried to do.
It's just one of those things that why I love data so much, because I could go find them and know that it's possible, and then link them all together. So I just, you know, not my personal best going into that braking zone.
it's never there is never 100% perfect lap, and there's always learning to be done, and whether it's in a wind tunnel or it's in the data. Then of this big, you guys, what do you call that corner? Not a carousel, is it?
Light bulb.
Light bulb.
I think a lot of people
here in the light bulb, you know, your mid corner speeds are, we already chatted about it, but you know, mid to high 70s, mid 80s, right? So a big difference. And then again, coming off that corner, you come off faster. By the time we are getting up here towards the braking zone for the next one, you know, it's 134, 135 to 130s, and you know, there's a 132 in there.
Right.
So again, you're giving up a little bit up there at the top end, but you're gaining so much in the middle and the high speed cornering that it's that the lap times are 108s and 9s versus 110s.
So that's one of those things. An aero heavy car might be a little bit of a hard car to race, because if you're slower in the straight line, people can kind of just drive past you, and then you're stuck behind them in the turns. I've been in that position many times, but you can see from the raw lap times, downforce helps you out a ton, just getting around a lap quicker, you know?
Absolutely. Perfect. I hope we got a little bit of data in here. We're not going to be able to get to all of the questions, I'm afraid, but what we will do is I'll chat with with AJ later, and we will answer the questions, and it will be for those of you watching the YouTube videos, we'll get the answers, and they'll be in a document in the description box below. All of our questions will be answered, and they'll be in there in a few days. So but I appreciate you coming. Let me bring back up the PowerPoint, and let's go in here and kind of close this out. All of our videos are done when we do these webinars, and we record them, of course, and put them out on our YouTube site. We have 154 videos up there now, and this one will be up within an hour or so. So if we went over something really super quick and maybe you missed it and you're here live, go ahead and go back and take a listen and see if you can catch it in the replay. So those will be up there very, very soon. We're a customer support company that happens to sell racing electronics, right? And we love to have people that are also customer support people, like AJ and many of our other co-hosts. AJ is always available and answering questions, and this is his business, and he creates not only hard parts, wings and splitters and these canards and all these different things, but he also is testing and helping you select all the right stuff. So AJ is there to help you on that side, and he's getting his car he changed shops recently, and is of course very, very busy. People are buying stuff, and he's a one-man shop, and so it we'll get him to and we'll provide all the help we can to get his suspension pots and some other things onto his data logger, so we can do even more of this. The upcoming next week, for next week's webinar, this is something we've touched around the edges on, and I wanted to do a specific webinar on this particular thing, which is MXX, all of our MX line TFT style dash loggers. That we've talked about how to colorize and make some of those benefits with when it comes to the alarms and maybe some of those other things, but there's a whole nother piece of that on the color side. So we'll talk a little bit about the alarms, and Robbie and I are gonna do this, and but we'll also talk about some ways of changing some other colors in there, and fonts and text sizes, and just making this a little bit more personalized if it's something that might work for you. So that's what we're going to talk about next week, MXX color management with Robbie, next Tuesday on April 20th. Looking forward to that. That's going to be a good one. And I can also share as we probably the next three after that. I'm not going to share who they are yet, but what I've done is I've lined up some of the best driver coaches that I was able to find that have not been guests yet, and we're going to bring them in one at a time, and we're going to talk about these are all professional drivers, and then they coach on the site as well, and they're going to chat about how they use data to help themselves, and especially how they the data analysis side, working with clients and folks that may get them, have them as driver coaches. So we're going to do this one, and then we're going to have probably 3 in a row that are 100% data analysis, just for those of you that are interested in kind of seeing some of that. We haven't done a data analysis in a while, so looking forward to that. So our next webinar next week with Robbie, it's going to be a good time. Look forward to having Robbie up here joining me instead of in the back answering questions and being the link master. So it's going to be a good time. Some contact information. I chatted about some things you might want to contact me about. There's my email address. Of course, AJ is out there at ajhartmanaero@gmail.com, or his website is ajhartmanaero.com. Give AJ a holler if you have any questions. Contact me. I think the thing I chatted about was the GM suspension pots that might be available. I got some part numbers you might want to look at and just take a look at it. So if you're interested in suspension stuff that way. AJ, I appreciate you coming. I know we started chatting about this 4 or 5 months ago, and everybody's schedules are busy, and we were finally able to make it happen. And these are somewhat self-satisfying for me. I really, really enjoyed this. This was a good time. I think everybody else did as well. Anything else you'd like to add as we kind of close this one down?
Follow me on YouTube. I do a whole bunch of stuff on there. Put up all of my wind tunnel videos. But yeah, otherwise my contact information is down there on the bottom. Love chatting about aero. Yeah, that's really about it. I appreciate you having me. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully people picked up a thing or two, and yeah, I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and I'm glad you were able to come in and join us. And I was watching the chat a little bit, and I seen more than one comment that said there
Yeah.
needed to be a part 2. So the maybe at the end of the summer, and maybe when things slow down a little bit for you again, maybe we'll have you come back in and we can chat a little bit more. Maybe look at some of your data with suspension pots on it and back up some of the stuff we talked about. So
yeah, I'd love to get to that point, and definitely open to it.
thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. It was a good time had by all. Looking forward to seeing everybody here a week from now when we talk about using color a little bit more on our MXX data loggers. Everybody have a great week. Talk to you soon, and we will see you all next time.
Yeah, everybody.